Alright, now that we've got our general formatting and our general settings for our report set up, let's take a look at how to build that table of contents and appendix. What we typically find is that our students get most frustrated by building the table of contents, and that's because Microsoft Word, when you try to add the dots between titles and page numbers, creates what it calls an ellipsis, or three dots that are sequenced together to indicate a missing word or phrase. While that's great for general typing within a document, that is not what we want whenever we're building our table of contents. So before we jump into Microsoft Word, let's take a look at some of the basic formatting requirements for the table of contents and the appendix. For the table of contents, we want our level 1 headings, or the section headings, to be left aligned at the margin. For the level 2 headings, or the subheadings within the sections, we want those indented 1/2 inch from the margin. And we want the page numbers for the entirety of the table of contents to be aligned at 6 inches from the left margin. And in between the heading titles and the page numbers, we want a string of dots. That is called a dot leader. We want that string of dots between the page number and the heading title. That string of dots should be equally spaced, and it shouldn't flag that there's a grammar issue there if we do it correctly. Now for the appendix part of the table of contents section, the requirements are a little different. In this case, we add an additional piece of information between the attachment identifier and the page number. The attachment identifier is attachment 1 or attachment 2. It's the indicator of which numbered attachment it is. So the attachment identifier, attachment 1, would be left aligned at the left margin. Now next to the attachment identifier, we have a little bit of space, and then we give the title for what the attachment is. So for instance, attachment 1 is the training plan. So we would scoot over 1 inch, or we would indent 1 inch from the left margin, and after attachment 1, we would simply put training plan. And then all the way to the right side of the page at the 6 inch mark from the left margin, we want the page numbers, and we want our dot leader to occur between the attachment title and the page numbers. Now while this may seem really confusing, we're going to step through it step by step in Microsoft Word so that you can get a head start on building that table of contents and not face the frustration that'll. Now, I've reopened the document that we completed at the end of the first video. Nothing has been changed. And if you remember, when we created the table of contents page, we left an extra line below the table of contents heading. The reason we did that is so that we can set up our table of contents before the page break. So if we think about the table of contents formatting requirements, particularly the alignment of the text, remember our level 1 headings, or the section headings, should be left aligned. Our page numbers should be aligned 6 inches from the left margin, and the level 2 heading should be indented 1/2 inch from the left margin. Now rather than having to try to remember all of these settings for each line, we can use the paragraph tool or the paragraph settings within Microsoft Word to have Microsoft Word do all of the work for us, including adding the dot leaders. Here's how we do that. When we're on the line where we want our table of contents text to be, we want to come up to the toolbar, click Home, and then click our little box with the arrow that brings us to paragraph settings. Instead of changing any of the content or any of the settings within this option box, we want to click this little button that says Tabs. And the tabs settings are related to how the computer, or how Microsoft Word, responds when you press the tab key on your keyboard. So we want our first tab stop. We don't need to set a tab for level 1 headings because they start at the left margin. Anything that starts beyond the left margin, we want to set a tab stop for. So in this case, let's go ahead and set a tab stop for those level 2 headings. Remember, these are indented 1/2 inch from the left margin. So we can type 0.5, the decimal equivalent of 1/2, and then click the Set button. that's going to add a tab stop that does nothing else other than move the cursor half an inch from the left margin when we press tab. Now we want to add a second tab stop at the 6-inch placement. We type the number 6 in the tab stop, but this time we want to add the dot leader, which is the second option under the leaders, to this tab stop. And when we click set, we've now told Microsoft Word that once we've extended beyond the half-inch mark, the next time the tab key is pressed, it needs to move the cursor all the way to the 6-inch area and add a dot leader to everything preceding that area. And we'll see that in action here in a moment. So let's click OK to save our settings. And we notice that right here in the ruler, if you have the ruler view enabled, we see that these little L's indicating there's a tab stop have been added to our ruler. So let's start setting up our table of contents. First is the title page. And you'll notice that the text extends beyond that half-inch mark. So when we press tab, all of the dots are added in a nice, neat, evenly spaced format. The title page is page 1, and that's a preparatory number 1. We press enter. We move on to the second item, table of contents. We tab over. It's preparatory page 2. Appendix. We tab. Preparatory page 3. And now we get to the content of our report. Section 1, Introduction, page 1. Section 2, Developing a Plan, is going to be on page, we're not sure yet because we haven't written it, so we can just leave that blank and we can start adding the remainder of the table of contents. Now, after section 2 is a subheading, so we can press the tab key. It moves us over 1/2 inch, but it doesn't add a dot leader. In this particular case, the subheading is why I picked this project. If we press tab again, our dot leader appears, and we can leave a placeholder for our text. Let's do it one more time. There's another subheading here, so we're going to press tab. Time frame is the heading. We press tab one more time. We get our dot leader, and we can place a placeholder for our page number. Now, we'll continue doing this until we've built our entire table of contents. Now let's talk for a moment about the appendices, or I'm sorry, the attachments within the appendix that requires that we set up this tab spacing one more time. Now remember, we said that this is a little bit different because we have an attachment identifier followed by an attachment title followed by a page number. We're going to set this up in a very similar way. We're going to go to the beginning of the second line on that page. We're going to come back to the paragraph settings within the Home tab of the toolbar. We're going to go to our Tabs tool, and we are going to set our tab stop positions. We don't need to set a tab stop for the attachment identifier, such as attachment 1, because it starts at the left margin. However, at the 1 inch mark on our ruler, or 1 inch from the left margin, we want our attachment name to appear. So we can set a 1 inch stop, and now we're going to set a 6 inch stop, just like we did before for the page number, and we want that one to have a dot leader. So we select the second leader option, which is the dots, and we click set. We're going to hit OK to close, and now we can begin setting up our table of attachments for the appendix. So we start with attachment 1. We press tab. It scoots over to that 1 inch spot. we're going to type training plan as the title. We press tab one more time. Our dot leader appears, and we put a placeholder for the page number. We can do it again for attachment 2. We tab over. This is our proof of measurements. We tab again. We get our dot leader. We can assign a placeholder. And we can do the third attachment, which is our journal. We hit tab one last time, and we add our placeholder. And that's how we make our table of contents relatively pain-free, where we don't have to fight with spacing or alignment. Everything will fall right in place.